Hey crew, it's Pitt, and I'm back with another Bible study. Today we will be getting back into Numbers, and the very first part of this is going to be a little bit boring, but it does get a little bit more interesting as we get farther in. If you're new here, if you're unfamiliar with what we're doing in this Bible study, I suggest that you start in Genesis because I step on a lot of toes along the way, and I would hate for them to be yours. I hold several very unconventional beliefs, and I'm okay with that. I am not here to convert anybody. I'm here merely doing a Bible study, reading the book, and figuring things out as we go along. And where I am is not where I began, and it's probably not where you are currently, unless you've been here with me. With that being said, we are going to be diving back into number 7 because we wrapped up in number 6. I'm going to do something today that I normally don't do. We're going to skip a good portion of text today because it is simply a repeat, right? And I'll talk about it here in just a second. Number 7, the offering of dedication. On the day Moses finished setting up the tabernacle, he anointed and consecrated it, and all its furnishings, along with the altar and all its utensils. And the leaders of Israel, the head of their families, presented an offering. These men were the tribal leaders who had supervised the registration. They brought their offering before the Lord They brought as their offering before the Lord 6 covered carts and 12 oxen, an ox from each leader, and a cart from every 2 leaders, and presented them before the tabernacle. And the Lord said to Moses, "Accept these gifts from them, that they may be used in the work of the tent of meeting, and give them to the Levites, to each man according to his service." And so Moses took the carts and oxen and gave them to the Levites. He gave the Gershonites 2 carts and 4 oxen, as their service required. He gave the Merarites 4 carts and 8 oxen, as their service required. If I butcher any names, it is not intentionally. All under the direction of Ithamar, son of Aaron, the priest. But he did not give any to the Kohathites, since they were to carry on their shoulders the holy objects for which they were responsible. And when the altar was anointed, the leaders approached with their offerings for its dedication and presented them before the altar. And the Lord said to Moses, "Each day one leader is to present his offering for the dedication of the altar." Now here's where we're going to skip a lot of text. I'm going to read this first paragraph, and the only thing that changes between this paragraph and the next 11 paragraphs past it is the name of who's presenting the offering and who they are doing it for. And so, on the first day, Nahshon, son of Amminadab, from the tribe of Judah, drew near with his offering. His offering was 1 silver platter weighing 130 shekels, 1 silver bowl weighing 70 shekels, both according to the sanctuary shekel, and filled with fine flour, mixed with oil for a grain offering. 1 gold dish weighing 10 shekels, filled with incense. 1 young bull, 1 ram, and 1 male lamb, a year old, for the burnt offering. 1 male goat for a sin offering, and a peace offering of 2 oxen, 5 rams, 5 male goats, 5 male lambs, a year old. This was the offering of Nahshon, son of Amminadab. Now, you can go back and read through these yourself. There may be some variation that I missed, but it is the same thing repeated 12 times. And so we don't need to go through that and waste time. So these were the offerings from the leaders of Israel for the dedication of the altar when it was anointed: 12 silver platters, 12 silver bowls, and 12 gold dishes. Each silver platter weighed 130 shekels. Each silver bowl weighed 70 shekels. The total weight of the silver articles was 2,400 shekels, according to the sanctuary shekel. The 12 gold dishes filled with incense weighed 12 shekels each, according to the sanctuary shekel. The total weight of the gold dish was 120 shekels. All the livestock for the burnt offerings totaled 12 bulls, 12 rams, and 12 male lambs a year old, together with their grain offerings, the 12 male goats for the sin offering. All the livestock sacrificed for the peace offering totaled 24 bulls, 60 rams, 60 male goats, and 60 male lambs a year old. This was the dedication offering for the altar after it was anointed. And when Moses entered the tent of meeting to speak with the Lord, he heard the voice speaking to him from between the 2 cherubim above the mercy seat on the ark of the testimony. Thus the Lord spoke to him. Okay, so that was just an enumeration of the gifts from the tribes to the temple, right? That's the book of Numbers likes to put numbers on things. Now there's history spread throughout this, and that's the reason why we really wanted to go through. But we just skipped the part. It was just repeated, right? That was the summary. Now, God's going to address Moses, and it's important enough that he's going to not be face to face. He's going to use this communication device that they have inside the tabernacle that we've covered extensively in Exodus. And so what's important enough to talk about, right? And then the Lord says to Moses, speak to Aaron and tell him, when you set up the 7 lamps, they are to light the area in front of the lampstand. Okay. And Aaron did so. He set up the lamps facing towards the front of the lampstand, just as the Lord had commanded Moses. And this is how the lampstand was constructed. It was made of hammered gold from its base to its blossoms, fashioned according to the pattern the Lord had showed Moses. We don't have the precise pattern. I am sure that you could find examples on the internet. I'm not going to bother with that today either. We have talked before about the patterns and what it was set as. It was supposed to be blossoms, very specific ones, than what it looked like. And again the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, take the Levites from among the Israelites and make them ceremonially clean. This is what you must do to cleanse them. Sprinkle them with the water of purification. Have them shave their whole bodies and wash their clothes, and so purify themselves. Then have them take a young bull with its grain offering of fine flour mixed with oil, and you are to take a second young bull for a sin offering. And bring the Levites before the tent of meeting and assemble the whole congregation of Israel. And you are to present the Levites before the Lord, and have the Israelites lay their hands upon them. Aaron is to present the Levites before the Lord as a wave offering from the sons of Israel, so that they may perform the service of the Lord. And the Levites are to lay their hands on the heads of bulls, and offer to the Lord one as a sin offering and the other as a burnt offering, to make atonement for the Levites. And you are to have the Levites stand before Aaron and his sons, and then present them before the Lord as a wave offering. In this way you shall separate the Levites from the rest of the Israelites, and the Levites will belong to me. After you have cleansed them and presented them as a wave offering, they may come to serve at the tent of meeting. For the Levites who have been wholly given to me from among the sons of Israel, I have taken them for myself in place of all who come first from the womb, the firstborn of all the sons of Israel. For the firstborn male in Israel is mine, both man and beast. I set them apart for myself on the day I struck down all the firstborn in the land of Egypt. But I have taken the Levites in place of all the firstborn among the sons of Israel, and I have given the Levites as a gift to Aaron and his sons from among the Israelites, to perform the service of the Israelites at the tent of meeting, and to make atonement on their behalf, so that no plague will come against the Israelites when they approach the sanctuary. And so Moses, Aaron, and the whole congregation of Israel did with the Levites everything that the Lord had commanded Moses they do. The Levites purified themselves and washed their clothes, and Aaron presented them as a wave offering before the Lord. Aaron also made atonement for them to cleanse them. After that, the Levites came to perform their service at the tent of meeting in the presence of Aaron and his sons. Thus they did with the Levites just as the Lord had commanded Moses. Retirement for the Levites. And as the Lord said to Moses, this applies to the Levites. Men 25 years of age or older shall enter to perform the service and the work at the tent of meeting. But at the age of 50, they must retire from performing the work and no longer serve. After that, they may assist their brothers in fulfilling their duties at the tent of meeting, but they themselves are not to do the work. This is how you assign responsibilities to the Levites. So that was the consecration of the priests, which was covered more extensively in Leviticus. We talked about that, and the establishment of the order and the setting apart the governing body of the Israelites. That's what this was. This was designating these people are in charge of making the decisions for us. Now, Moses is still the head of the whole congregation. He's the one that's making directional decisions. But the Levites are handling the day-to-day matters for the most part now. And soon they will assume the responsibilities of Moses. When Aaron goes and he passes, and then later Moses passes, then it passes on to the Levites. The second Passover. In the first month of the second year, after Israel had come out of the land of Egypt, so this is right in the beginning, right? The Lord spoke to Moses in the wilderness of Sinai. The Israelites are to observe the Passover at its appointed time. You are to observe it at the appointed time at twilight on the 14th day of this month in accordance with its statutes and ordinances. And so Moses told the Israelites to observe the Passover, and they did so in the wilderness of Sinai at twilight on the 14th day of the first month. The Israelites did everything just as the Lord had commanded Moses. But there were some men who were unclean due to a dead body, so that they could not observe Passover on that day. And they came before Moses and Aaron that same day and said to Moses, "We are unclean because of a dead body. But why should we be excluded from presenting the Lord's offering with the other Israelites at the appointed time?" "Wait here until I find out what the Lord commands concerning you," Moses replied. And then the Lord said to Moses, "Tell the Israelites, when any one of you or your descendants is unclean because of a dead body, or is away on a journey, he may still observe the Passover to the Lord. Such people are to observe it at twilight on the 14th day of the second month. They are to eat the lamb together with unleavened bread and bitter herbs. They will not leave any of it until morning or break any of its bones. They must observe the Passover according to its statutes." So, if you were ritually unclean, if you were away on a journey, if you were unable to hold the Passover, you could have another one exactly 1 month later. But if a man who is ceremonially clean and is not on a journey still fails to observe the Passover, he must be cut off from his people, because he did not present the Lord's offering at its appointed time. That man will bear the consequences of his sin. And if a foreigner dwelling among you wants to observe the Passover to the Lord, he is to do so according to the Passover statute and its ordinances. You are to apply the same statute to both the foreigner and the native of the land. Okay. Now that's all housekeeping, right? This is all things that are internal functionality that is reinforcing some things from Leviticus. It is covering a couple of things that didn't necessarily get covered and laid out in Leviticus. And now we're going to be getting into some more of the history. It's about to get a little bit more interesting. So if you stuck around this long, kudos to you. We're going to go through this in the next chapter. And I don't think we're going to get into 11, but we will be getting into a little bit of geography here. So let's do that. On the day that the tabernacle, the tent of testimony, was set up, the cloud covered it and appeared like fire above the tabernacle from evening until morning, and it remained that way continually. The cloud would cover the tabernacle by day, and at night it would appear like fire. And whenever the cloud was lifted from above the tent, the Israelites would set out. And whenever the cloud settled, the Israelites would camp. At the Lord's command, the Israelites set out, and at the Lord's command they camped. And as long as the cloud remained over the tabernacle, they remained encamped. Even when the cloud lingered over the tabernacle for many days, the Israelites kept the Lord's charge and did not set out. Sometimes the cloud remained over the tabernacle for only a few days, and they would camp at the Lord's command and set out at the Lord's command. And sometimes the cloud remained only from evening until morning, and when it lifted in the morning, they would set out. Whether it was by day or by night, when the cloud was taken up, they would set out. And whether the cloud lingered for 2 days, a month, or longer, the Israelites camped and did not set out as long as the cloud remained over the tabernacle. But when it was lifted, they would set out. They camped at the Lord's command, and they set out at the Lord's command. They carried out the Lord's charge according to his command through Moses. Okay, so what we have here is they said they have invested a whole lot in this, right? Let's pop on over to Google Earth, and I'm going to make sure that y'all can actually see what's going on here. Okay. So, I hold slightly different beliefs than other people, right? We talked about that. Now, according to common belief, here on the Sinai Peninsula, you have Mount Sinai. I don't think that that's Mount Sinai, and they're not alone in that belief. Some people believe that Mount Sinai is at the bottom of the Arabian Peninsula, way down here. I don't believe that either. Some people believe that Mount Sinai is right here at Jebel al-Lawz. There are some fairly solid arguments for that, but I believe that it is slightly off. I believe that just south of Jebel al-Lawz, we have the actual site where Moses did his thing, Can I prove that? Absolutely not. It's not even at the summit of the mountain. I get that. But there is room down here, barely, for 3 million people to camp, with a separate place for the people to come about, like when the men gathered separate from the rest of the camp. There's enough room here for 600,000 men, for the leaders of the tribe to separate themselves, and it would definitely appear that Moses was going up all the way to the top of the mountain. I don't necessarily feel that he had to go to the top, but it doesn't even say that. It says that when he went up the mountain, it doesn't say to the top. I think he went to this little spot right here. I think that this little spot right here with this naturally occurring pentagram on the ground might be a focal point of power. It is a point where two different terrains come together. It is a dividing line, and every part that Moses had traveled through prior to that, let's get turned back to the north here, that's going to be that way, has been through relatively red and yellow areas, right? There's a couple of little dark spots, and I get that, but like generally speaking, most of this is red and yellow. And when he was taking care of his father-in-law's flocks in the hill country here in Midian, he would wander far. That's a common thing. And we don't know exactly where Jethro or Raul, where exactly his lands were, but it was in the hill country east of the Sea of Reeds, which is right here, the Gulf of Aqaba. So it is a fairly firm assumption that this is the area of Laman. This is the area, like this is Midian, right? If we're looking at it, Midian is this area here. Moab is roughly this area right here. Like there's a dividing line along this mountain range right here, and they had this spot right here at this current time. Prior to that, they were up to this river. They got driven back down here by some other people. We will get to them in a little while. And then the land of Canaan is east of the Jordan and the Dead Sea. All of this over here is the land of Canaan. There are several other tribes, the Hittites, and they're through here. This is Jericho. Just so we're familiar with the geography, right? So way down here, this is the Red Sea, the Gulf of Suez, and the Aqaba. East of Aqaba is where Jethro lived, and this is the area where he brings the Israelites to begin with. A lot of people like to think that the desert of sin is here. I don't believe that. I believe that this is the desert of sin. We've talked about that extensively through Exodus. We talked about that before, so we're not going to dive into it any deeper than that now. But I believe that this is Sinai, and this is the area that we're talking about them being in. The desert of sin is right here. So let's dive back into numbers. Because we're going to wrap up in 10 for today, and then we're going to get into some wild stuff come 11 and farther. And then the Lord said to Moses, make 2 trumpets of hammered silver to be used for calling the congregation and having the camp set out. When both are sounded, the whole congregation is to assemble before you at the entrance to the tent of meeting. But if only one is sounded, then the leaders, the head of the clans of Israel, are to gather before you. When you sound short blast, the camps that lie on the east side are to set out, and when you sound short blast the second time, the camps that lie to the south are to set out. The blasts are to signal them to set out. To convene the assembly, you are to sound long blast, not short ones. The sons of Aaron, the priests, are to sound the trumpets. This shall be a permanent statute for you and the generations to come. When you enter into battle in your land against an adversary who attacks you, sound short blast on the trumpet, and you will be remembered before the Lord your God, and saved from your enemies. And on your joyous occasions, your appointed feasts, and in the beginning of each month, you are to blow the trumpets over your burnt offerings and fellowship offerings to serve as a reminder for you before your God. I am the Lord your God. And on the 20th day of the second month of the second year, the cloud was lifted from above the tabernacle of the testimony. And the Israelites set out from the wilderness of Sinai, traveling from place to place until the cloud settled in the wilderness of Paran. All right, back to Google Earth real quick. Because I spent a good bit of time trying to figure out exactly where the wilderness or the desert of Paran is. The desert of Sin is this red one right here, right? It appears, to the best I can determine, that the desert of Paran is this spot right here. It is below the Moabites right here and the Ammonites. It is east of the Araba Desert, which is over here, and it is north of the Desert of Sin. So they talk about the sun rises over the Mount of Paran and covers over them later in Deuteronomy. That appears to be over here. So we're probably looking at the area just east of Petra. This particular area is going into the Negev, which is south of the Dead Sea, which is a whole territory that we're going to be talking about here shortly. But they're here in the desert of Paran, as near as I can determine. There is no current desert of Paran. Okay, the wilderness of Paran. And then they set out this first time according to the Lord's command through Moses. First, the divisions of the camp of Judah set out under the standard. It goes through how they set out. That is not that important. It is the march order. If you want to see it, you can go back. I'm going to save time in my voice. And then Moses said to Hobab, the son of Moses, father-in-law of Moses' father-in-law Reuel, also known as Jethro, the Midianite. We talked about where Midian is. It's east of the Sea of Akba, west of the mountains that separated from the desert of Sin. We are setting out for the place of which the Lord said, I will give it to you. Come with us, and we will treat you well. For the Lord has promised good things to Israel. I will not go, Hobab replied. Instead, I am going back to my own land and my own people. Please do not leave us, Moses said, since you know where we should camp in the wilderness. That's supposed to be the cloud. Right? The cloud is telling you where to camp. Why do you need eyes? Why do you need somebody that is familiar with the desert? Hold on. Until that cloud moves, you don't move. You don't move until that cloud moves. It doesn't matter if this man tells you, hey, we need to move over here and we need to camp a mile down this way. If that cloud doesn't move, then you don't move. Right? Isn't that what we're supposed to be believing about this story? Consistency. This is why Numbers is skipped, right? It's because of things like this. This is why they don't dive into a full Genesis. They don't do Exodus all the way through, right? And if it is, then it is constantly stopping and talking about how this particular action that doesn't make sense is justified by this later action. There is no justification for this. If you are traveling under the exclusive direction of the Lord, which you are claiming, whether the cloud lingers for 2 days or a month, they did not set out. The cloud determines. Unless we're talking about, having to get directions on where to camp. I don't mean to be antagonistic when I point this out, but I have to be a little bit antagonistic when I point this out because there is somebody watching this right now who is like, but. There is no but to this. This is one of those there is no but to. Either you are following the direct leading of this cloud exclusively, or you are not. And if you need somebody to tell you where to camp, you're not following the thing. But we have talked before about what I believe the tabernacle does, what I believe Moses is able to do through the ark with the shamir. He is in control of this cloud. It is a discharge of electricity that he is in control of through a transmission device. he can direct this cloud. They implement into the breastplate the control of this cloud, this force that is generated from the ark. We talked about that extensively when we went through Exodus. We will probably talk about it again, because when we get to Solomon, there's some wild stuff that happens with that Shamir. But we're going to go ahead and finish this chapter out real quick. And I don't think we're going to get in. Yeah, we're not going to get into 11 today. We will get into that one. It gets wild from here on out. You think this is wild? This is just pointing out something obvious, right? I don't hold it against him. Well, we'll get to it in a second. So they set out on a 3-day journey from the mountain of the Lord, with the ark of the covenant of the Lord traveling ahead of them for those 3 days, to seek a resting place for them. And the cloud of the Lord was over them by day when they set out from the camp. And whenever the ark set out, Moses would say, "Rise up, O Lord. May your enemies be scattered. May those who hate you flee before you." And when he came to rest, he would say, "Return, O Lord, to the countless thousands of Israel." Well, y'all did put a count on it. That's how this whole book started. But we're going to go ahead and wrap this one up. There's a whole lot of truth in this book. There is a whole lot of things that are very useful in this book. If you follow the guidelines laid out in this book, you can have a happy, healthy, productive life as a well-functioning member of society. But not if you follow every single word, and not if you take it as irrefutable proof. If you take it as the indisputable word of God, then you've got serious problems. And I absolutely believe in the God of the universe. I believe that God created all things, every single thing. He is me, he is you, he is the space between me and you, and he is the space between me and you. He is everything. And he is beyond this book. He is beyond any one specific book. He is beyond my definition. He is beyond anybody's definition. God is so big, we cannot put limits upon him. He is beyond limits. The only limitation that I can conceive of is the restriction of you can't manifest inside yourself. So he manifests us to experience for him, right? That is my whole philosophy on it. We talked about that extensively. We talked about that in Genesis, and I've talked about that outside of the Bible studies, because we're here for lessons. We're here to learn, and we can learn great things from this book. We can learn how to rise up and how to become accountable. We can learn how to be set apart. We can learn how to pray and to meditate and to bring our problems to God, because he wants to help us. But we also learn some terrible things in this book. We can learn slavery is okay and that people have a price on them. We can learn that in this book. We can learn that if somebody does something slightly wrong, you should hit them in the head with rocks until they are no longer. You can learn that in this book. It is perfectly acceptable doctrine in this book for you to hit people in the head with rocks. I don't believe in that. I believe that God wants us all to choose better, right? And sometimes, yes, the maximum punishment is a necessary thing sometimes. Some people refuse to be redeemed, and you cannot live with irredeemable, right? Not because they're irredeemable, but because they choose to never be redeemed. And if their choice is to be destructive, then you have to take them out of the equation, or else you are not loving the people around you, right? Mercy to a criminal is criminal to the victims. Being nice to a murderer who is unrepentant, right? Somebody that just chooses cold-blooded murder and is unrepentant of it, there's no reason to keep them around. You're not going to rehabilitate somebody like that. If they have no remorse, there is no rehabilitation. And so sometimes, yes, that is the ultimate option, but I don't believe it's for sleeping around. I don't believe it's for cursing. I don't believe it's for working on a Sunday. I don't believe that. I don't believe that it was ever a justified thing. I don't. I believe that God only ever wanted you to come to him. He only ever wanted you to actually want him back. He doesn't care if you drink a little bit. He cares if you're a drunkard. He doesn't care if you cuss. He cares if you're irresponsible with your life. Slipping up a cuss word every now and then, even having it as part of your vernacular. If you're not being mean with it, it's just a word. It doesn't mean anything. Using the Lord's name in vain is not saying, I'm not going to say it, but y'all know what it is. Like, that's not what it is, though. It's making a promise in his name that will not come true, and you know it. That is using his name in vain. We've talked about that extensively, too. I'm going to go ahead and start wrapping this up. The responsibility for you is to choose God, right? Like, not in a, I'm going to abstain from all worldly pleasures, because that is what God wants. God doesn't want you to abstain from all the worldly pleasures. He wants you to be responsible with those pleasures, right? Life is about balance. I have talked extensively about the balance of life and how if you follow the 7 tenets of God, then you stay away from the 7 wraths of God, right? If you live by the righteous, then you don't die by the non-righteous. Make the choice to be his. Make the choice to serve him. Right? It's not about the restrictions you get. It's about the blessings you receive. And it's not even really about that. Like, it is, but you get them regardless, right? We're not going to get into that today. We're not going to get into that today. God loves you. He wants you to serve him willingly. He's not trying to restrict your life so that you can never have fun. That is not what it's about. And that's where every single religion gets it wrong. Hopefully I brought a little bit of enlightenment and not too much confusion to a very complicated topic. I understand that I hold unconventional beliefs, and I am not trying to offend you by them. I am simply pointing out the inconsistencies in this book. I am simply pointing out where God really lies in this book. And God doesn't lie, right? This book was written by men, and they had the best of intentions. I will grant them that. They did a wonderful thing. I will grant them that. But they were not God. Even if they were inspired by God, they're not God. They got stuff wrong. We just saw an example of that. That does not mean that the book is completely wrong. It just means that there are parts that are wrong. We have a habit of reading things into things, right? We add extra context sometimes when it doesn't belong there. That is one of the things that we have done here. You can see an example of this out in the wild, right, with the Harry Potter series. There are all kinds of people who will pick apart them books and read all kinds of theories and plans and underlying causes and all kinds of stuff that is not in the book. It was never the intention of the author for it to be in the book. But because our context has changed as a society, we read different things into that book. It is the same thing here. It really is. The context of our lives have changed. We do not live the same lives. Now, that does not mean that it should be just wild out here and you should just do as thou wilt, because that is dumb. It is a life. If you're making the correct choice, then it is a life of service. And that's where I'm going to wrap it up. To the crew, thanks for hanging out. I appreciate every single minute that you are here with me, and I am praying for you every single day. I love you. God loves you. And until next time, this has been Pitts Take. Wait, you're perfect, whole, and complete just the way that you are. And until next time, it's been Pitts Take. Peace.